Exile always sounded clean in council speech, as if it were a lawful door closing behind someone who had already said goodbye. Rowena learned the truth in the space between one breath and the next. Exile was smoke in her lungs, wet ash under her knees, and 40 familiar faces arranged in a circle so they would not have to meet her eyes one by one. A pack did not need claws to tear someone apart. It needed ritual, a fire, and a story told loudly enough to drown the truth. By moonrise, they had given her all three. The border pyres burned in iron bowls hammered into black stone, each flame fed with cedar resin and old wolf bone, so the smoke carried rank and memory. The wind curled it through Rowena's hair and into her mouth, bitter and metallic. At 7 months along, her center of balance had shifted, and standing for too long made pressure build in her lower back until every breath felt borrowed. She kept one palm beneath her belly anyway, not to hide it, but to steady herself while the tribunal called her by the wrong names: traitor, seducer, ash-touched. Cyrus Stormborn stood at the highest step of the pyre dais in a cloak the color of dried soot, silver clasps glinting at his throat. He had cultivated the stillness of a holy man, but Rowena had once watched him bargain for salt roots with 3 different lies in a single evening. Even now his calm was performance. His eyes moved too quickly when elders whispered, measuring what fear had landed and what fear still needed feeding. "We do not punish desire," he said, voice deep enough to carry over crackling fire. "We punish corruption." Rowena Wildfire consorted with enemy wolves and traded pack routes for promises of rank. Murmurs rolled through the crowd. Some were eager, some were sickened but silent. Rowena searched instinctively for the few faces she had once trusted. Tamsin looked down at her own boots. Old Brindle stared at the flames as if they could absolve him. Mara, who had held Rowena's face in both hands after her first shift and called her little sister, stood with the Ash Moon zealots and did not blink. Rowena lifted her chin. "Say who saw me." Cyrus gestured, and 2 witnesses stepped forward. Joran, a hunter she had patched after a ravine fall last spring. Elsie, who owed Rowena 3 months of herb stores and gratitude. They repeated the testimony in careful phrases, too careful, each sentence polished into the same rhythm. She had met rogues at the East Ridge. She had offered them scent maps. She had asked what title she would receive after a border breach. "You forged this," Rowena said, voice raw, disbelief thinning into fury. "Joran, look at me. Elsie, tell them where your shoulder scar came from if I was with rogues that night." Elsie's mouth trembled. Joran did not look up. Cyrus spread his hands as if grieved by her resistance. Guilt often arrives as accusation. "No." The word snapped out of her before she could smooth it. "Cowardice arrives like this." A hiss traveled through the zealot line. One of them, a broad-shouldered enforcer named Pell, stepped close enough that she smelled tallow oil on his leather. "Mind your tongue," he said. "You lost the right to challenge your betters." She almost laughed, because yesterday, Pell had begged her for willowbark tea and called her healer. Today, he called her filth, because the crowd required it. The laugh never came. A hard knot sat behind her ribs and would not move. I am not crazy. I am not forgetting my own life. I know where I walked, who I treated, what promises I made and did not make. This is happening because Cyrus needs a spectacle, and I am visible enough to burn. If I kneel, he wins quietly. If I stand, he wins loudly. Breathe anyway. Stand anyway. My body is not theirs. My child is not their argument. I am still here. I am still here. I am not gone. When she spoke again, her voice steadied. "You want my confession because truth will not serve you." Cyrus's expression changed by a fraction, annoyance slicing through his saintly mask. He turned to the elder ring. "Under Ash Moon doctrine, Refusal to confess at a purity judgment indicates spiritual contagion. Contagion must be cut away. The eldest counselor, gray-furred in wolf form once, now bent and trembling with age, nodded without lifting his gaze. Sentence? Border exile, Cyrus said. No shelter rights, no name rights. She leaves before second bell. A woman from the back shouted, "Take the mark from her first." Several voices joined, hungry now that they were safe in numbers. Brand the traitor. Burn the liar's hand. Make her swear she carries no heir of ours. Rowena's knees locked. Fear arrived clean and cold this time, not for herself, but for what ritual frenzy did to ordinary people. She had seen wounded wolves tear at healers who came to help when panic overtook pain. Crowds were worse. Crowds believed they were righteous. Pell grabbed her wrist and yanked her toward the nearest pyre. Heat licked her skin before flame touched her. Rowena twisted hard, wrenching free with a gasp as pain shot up her forearm. "Do not touch me." "By decree, she is unclean," Pell barked to the ring of enforcers. "Hold her." Mara moved then, finally, stepping forward with her jaw clenched. For one suspended beat, Rowena thought she had chosen mercy. Instead, Mara took a rope from her belt and offered it to Pell. Their fingers brushed. Neither woman looked at Rowena. That was the true sentence. Not exile. Betrayal with steady hands. The second bell had not yet rung when the first snow began, thin needles slanting through firelight. By late evening, it would become a full mountain storm. Everyone knew it. That was the point. Exile after dawn might be survival. Exile now was theater with plausible deniability. Cyrus lifted his hand for silence and delivered the final decree in the old cadence meant to sound sacred. Rowena Wildfire is cut from pack scent, pack table, pack protection. She will cross the deadland boundary before moon apex. Any wolf who shelters her shares her stain. Then he looked at her directly, and the piety dropped. "Run," he said quietly, too soft for the crowd. "It will make the lesson cleaner." The breaking point did not come as one dramatic blow. It came as accumulation. Mara's rope, Joran's silence, Cyrus's private satisfaction, and the way two enforcers moved toward her belly without asking permission, as if they could inspect legitimacy with their hands. Rowena stepped back, then again, pulse pounding so hard she tasted copper. One enforcer reached. She drove her elbow into his throat and felt cartilage buckle under the strike. He stumbled, coughing. Gasps erupted from the circle. Pell lunged, and Rowena pivoted on instinct, grabbing a half-burned torch from its stand. Sparks burst into the wind. "Do not come closer," she said, voice shaking but loud. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Cyrus shouted, "Seize her!" Everything fractured into motion. She flung the torch at a stack of ritual banners. Flame climbed dyed cloth in a bright rush, and zealots scattered to beat it down. Rowena ran. The first 100 strides were downhill over shale, slippery with freezing ash. Her boots slid, knees jarring with each impact. Behind her came shouts, then the baying call hunters used to coordinate pursuit. She knew those calls. She had answered them herself on winter searches. The knowledge hurt more than the cold. By the time she cleared the last boundary cairn, full snow had arrived, hard and horizontal. Wind clawed at her cloak and pushed breath back into her throat. She cut left into a pine break where scent dispersed poorly for trackers, and used the slope to mask her path, stepping on exposed roots when she could, stone when she could not. Her ankles throbbed. The skin over them felt tight and swollen inside wet leather. I cannot outrun a hunting line forever. So I stop being prey in a straight line. Think. Ridge wind from the west. Tracks will feel faster on open face than in trees. Keep moving, keep moving. If I fall, get up once more than they expect. Do not negotiate with panic. Breathe on 4, out on 4. The little one is listening to every storm in me. so I make my body a shelter and move. A horn sounded from behind farther than before. Good. The banner fire had bought her minutes. She turned north toward the old signal route abandoned after the rock slides 3 winters ago. Few wolves used it now, fewer in a storm. The Deadlands earned their name from exposure and empty miles, not bones. Still, pack pups were told ghost stories about it so they would stay near home. Rowena had never feared ghosts. She feared men with doctrine. An hour past moon apex, the trees thinned into a ridge of fractured slate. Snow hissed over stone like sand over glass. Her thighs shook. Her breath came ragged and white. Twice she had to brace against boulders while cramps gripped her calves, waiting them out with her forehead pressed to ice-cold rock. She kept one hand anchored low, counting inhalations until the tremor passed. Below the ridge, through the storm haze, she saw the silhouette of the ruined signal keep, its watchtower split and leaning, one wall collapsed inward. Relief struck so hard it was almost pain. Shelter. 4 walls, maybe 3. Enough. She descended carefully, half sliding the last stretch, and squeezed through the broken arch. The keep smelled of old stone, damp moss, and the faint animal musk of long-ago travelers. No fresh pack scent reached her over the wind. Good. Good enough. Her fingers were stiff as she gathered splintered timber and dry thatch from a collapsed stairwell niche. Flint sparked on the 3rd strike, then died. 4th strike, a thread of ember caught. She bent close, shielding it with both hands, breathing life into orange light until it grew teeth and climbed. When the survival fire steadied, Rowena sank to her knees beside it, shaking with delayed cold and fury and relief she did not trust. The flames painted the ruined chamber in broken gold. Stone, smoke, breath. A small circle of warmth carved out of exile. Then, from the far side of the keep, beyond the fallen beam and shadowed wall, came the scrape of a boot on stone. Rowena lurched to her feet so quickly her vision tunneled, one hand braced on the crumbling wall, the other closing around a charred length of timber as if it were a spear. The fire snapped and spat, throwing jagged light across the broken chamber. Snow hissed through a crack in the western stones, and in that narrow noise she heard it again. A measured step, then the faint drag of weight, like someone favoring one leg and refusing to show weakness. A man emerged from behind the collapsed beam with the patience of a predator who had already decided whether to attack. He was broad-shouldered, wrapped in a weather-dark cloak rimed with frost, his hair black except for one pale streak at his temple. A scar crossed his throat in a rough crescent, old and badly healed, and another cut through his right brow, splitting it into a permanent line of severity. He did not bear fangs, he did not posture. He watched her with a steadiness that felt more dangerous than either. "Drop that," he said, voice low and hoarse from cold. "You swing, you fall, you do not get back up tonight. Then stay back." Her arm trembled from fatigue, anger keeping it raised. "If you are with Stormborn, I will burn this place down before I let you drag me out." At the name, something hardened in his face, not surprise. Recognition sharpened with contempt. "I am not Ash Moon." He took one slow step closer, palms open, and the firelight caught a stitched emblem at his shoulder. A 7-pointed star scored through by a vertical line. She knew that mark from old trade maps and older warnings. Starfall territory, royal boundary. Her pulse stumbled. She had run farther north than she realized. The keep breathed with storm. Mortar dust drifted from the ceiling with each gust, and melted snow from her cloak ran down her spine in icy threads. The man tipped his chin toward her belly, not with judgment, but with blunt assessment of her condition. "You are in labor?" "No." The answer came too quickly, raw. "Not yet." "Good. Sit before your knees make the decision for you." The command in his tone raised her hackles, but her legs had begun to quiver in small, humiliating shocks. She lowered the timber by inches and sank back beside the fire, never taking her eyes from him. He moved to the opposite side of the flames and crouched, close enough to tend them, far enough not to corner her. His left hand was gloveless. Calloused fingers bore thin silver scars in parallel lines, as if claws had once raked across his palm and been answered in kind. Do not panic. He is one man, and I have survived men with louder power than this. Keep the wall at my back. Keep the fire between us. If he lies, I run when the wind rises and sound breaks apart. If he tells the truth, I still do not hand him trust because he speaks calmly. Breathe. Watch his shoulders, not his words. People reveal themselves in what they prepare to do, not what they promise. My child is listening. I will make this fear useful. Outside, a long howl rolled over the ridge, then another, closer and clipped at the end. Signal calls, not the hunting cadence from her former pack. Different intervals, disciplined. The stranger's head tilted slightly, listening. Your wolves? She asked. My sentries. He fed a split log into the fire. They will not enter unless I call. The statement struck her a beat late. Unless I call. Not unless my alpha calls. A cold realization threaded through her exhaustion. Who are you? His mouth twitched without humor. Tonight, a man trying not to have a corpse in his shelter by dawn. That is not a name. No. His gaze held hers, unreadable. It keeps us both alive anyway. For several breaths they listened to the storm batter the keep. By the time the moon climbed behind the cloud bank toward midnight, the wind shifted east and drove smoke low across the chamber, forcing them both closer to the center where the draft ran cleaner. He stripped one glove with his teeth and reached into a side satchel, bringing out a narrow flask and 2 hard cakes wrapped in cloth. I have bone broth, he said. Salted. You drink first. Suspicion flared again. Why? Because you are shivering so hard your jaw keeps locking between words. He poured broth into a dented tin cup and set it on a flat stone near the flames to warm. He made no move to hand it directly to her. The restraint unsettled her almost as much as aggression would have. Men who wanted leverage usually reached for touch first. She studied him while steam rose in pale ribbons. His cloak had been mended 3 times at the seam. His boots were military quality but old, left sole worn unevenly. Around his wrist sat a braided leather binding with tiny iron beads stamped in moonscript. Royal Guard issue, she thought, and then corrected herself. Higher than guard. The bowl was hot when she finally took it. The first sip burned her tongue, rich with marrow and thyme. Her body seized on it greedily, and shame followed immediately. She hated being this vulnerable in front of a stranger, hated that need could be seen. He ate only after she finished, biting into one ration cake with absent focus, as if his attention remained split between her, the doors, and memories she could not read. The fire popped. A coal rolled near her boot. She nudged it back with a toe, then winced as a cramp cinched low across her back and eased. His eyes narrowed. Pain? Muscle. She forced her shoulders down. From running. You came from the border pyres. It was not a question. She set the empty cup down carefully. You heard? I smelled cedar ash on you before you spoke. He paused. And fear. Not yours. The crowd's. That landed with unnerving precision. Rowena swallowed, suddenly aware of how thin the chamber felt. How little distance remained between strangers who both understood packs too well. If your sentries carry news, she said, they already know I am accused. They know a pregnant she-wolf crossed into my boundary chased by fools with doctrine and torches. That is enough. The old law stirred at the edge of her memory, half taught in childhood before practical politics replaced ritual education. Guest right under flame, shelter by moonrise, the burden of witness. She looked at the fire and then at him, unease prickling along her spine. You said your sentries take your call? Who gives that call? He leaned forward to adjust a slipping branch. For the first time, she saw, beneath the collar of his tunic, the faint pattern of rune scars crossing his clavicle and throat. Lines arranged in an archaic star knot used only in coronation rites. The timber in her hand slipped from nerveless fingers and thudded to stone. You are not a scout, she whispered. No. Not a guard. No. He met her gaze fully then, and the silence between them turned taut as drawn wire. I am Bastion Starfall. The name struck like a physical blow. Hidden Alpha. Vanished King. The man every council invoked when it wanted legitimacy, and every usurper insisted was dead. Rowena's breath hitched hard enough to hurt. She had spent months hearing Cyrus spit that name like a curse against old bloodlines and binding vows. And now the king sat across from her in a ruined keep with frost on his shoulders and a ration cake in his hand. You are supposed to be in the Southern Wars, she said. I was supposed to be many useful things. He tipped his head toward the storm. Tonight, I am here. A crack ripped through the ceiling stones, showering grit. The draft lunged and the fire sagged, flames collapsing low against the logs. Instinct moved them both at once. Rowena grabbed for the fallen kindling near the hearth's edge as Bastion reached from the opposite side to feed in a dry, split branch. Her fingers closed over wood. So did his. Heat slammed through her palm and up her arm in one blinding rush. Not the bite of fire, but a living current, fierce and intimate, threading spine to sternum, tightening every nerve into awareness. She gasped and jerked, but the pull held for one suspended heartbeat that seemed to ring inside bone. Deep in her belly, the child kicked once, hard enough to steal the rest of her breath. Bastion recoiled as if struck. The branch clattered into the embers and flared bright. He rose halfway, then braced a hand on the wall, shoulders rigid, head bowed. A rough sound left him, half inhale, half disbelief. When he looked up, amber bled through his irises, swallowing brown until his gaze went feral with old power barely leashed. The scar across his throat lit from within, runes igniting in thin gold lines that pulsed with his heartbeat. No, he said, but it came out like prayer and warning at once. Rowena pressed her burned-not-burned hand to her chest. Her pulse no longer felt singular. It answered another rhythm across the fire, matching, stumbling, then aligning again with terrifying precision. Warmth flooded her limbs, chased by dread, then a fierce, aching relief she did not consent to, and could not deny. Her instincts sharpened to a knife edge. Every scent in the room separated into layers: cedar smoke, wet wool, male skin, moon metal, and beneath all of it the clean, impossible certainty of recognition. He was looking at her as if he had been searching through war and ash and years of silence for exactly this face. Her throat tightened. What did you do? His laugh was bitter and breathless. Nothing. That is the problem. Outside, the sentry howls cut off mid-call. Even the storm seemed to pull back from the keep, wind flattening into a long, waiting hush. Old stories returned in jagged fragments, claim fire shared under moonrise, witness seen or unseen, bond before vow. This was a survival fire, she said, voice shaking. Not a right. I did not agree to any right. You think I would trap you with this? The gold in his eyes burned brighter, then dimmed by force as he dragged control around himself like armor. I have spent years avoiding every law that could bind another life to mine. Then why does it feel like... She stopped, unable to name the sensation without yielding to it, like being found, like being cornered, like finally breathing after months underwater. Bastion's jaw flexed. He looked away first, toward the doorway where snow spun in hard silver spirals, as if distance could blunt what had already happened. When he spoke again, his voice was rougher. Because the bond recognized us. He swallowed once. And because your child carries moon signature strong enough to wake dead law. Fear rose sharp and immediate. Cyrus. The eclipse tribunal. The Ashbrand doctrine that hunted prophecy lines like disease. Rowena shoved herself up, swaying, one hand instinctively over her belly. Then he will come, she said. If this can be sensed, he will come for it. Bastion straightened to full height, every line of him turning lethal and precise. The feral light in his gaze narrowed into intent. He was already coming, he said. Now he has a deadline. They stood across the fire, locked in each other's stare while the flames climbed between them, no longer accidental warmth, but a boundary neither could pretend was ordinary. In Rowena's chest, terror and longing collided hard enough to leave her shaking, yet she did not look away. She had been named traitor, unmade by her own, driven into storm and stone. Now the most dangerous man in the north looked at her as if she were fate, and wound and answer in one body. The child moved again, smaller this time, a turning rather than a strike. Rowena felt the motion and lifted her chin. Do not decide for me, she said quietly. Not you, not him, not anyone. Bastion held her gaze, then gave one solemn nod. Then speak, he answered, and I will follow your lead, even if it burns my throne. Rowena did not lower her chin. Then start with this, she said. If we move tonight, I fall on the ridge. If we stay, your sentries smell me and rumors outrun us by morning. Tell me which risk you choose when both can kill us. Bastion studied the ceiling crack where snow dust sifted down in a steady whisper. We stay until the wind drops below knife strength, he said. Then we move at first gray light, not full dawn. My outer sentries already know there is a guest under my protection. They do not know your name, and they will keep it that way until I speak otherwise. Protection, she repeated, tasting the word as if it might hide a hook. His expression tightened, not offended, only precise. You owe me no trust, but you will have terms. He crouched again, slower this time, deliberate enough that she could track every motion. You keep the inside wall. I keep the door line. I do not touch you unless you ask, or unless stone starts falling on your head. If pain changes, you tell me. If fear changes, you still tell me. The simple structure unsettled her because it was practical, not possessive. Not once did he say mine. Another gust slammed the broken arch and sent sparks spiraling. Bastion rose and crossed to a half-collapsed alcove, returning with a rolled bedfur and 2 strips of cured hide. He laid both down on her side of the fire, then stepped back. You sleep in layers, he said. Boots off. Feet up if you can. I am not fragile. I know. His gaze moved to her ankles, swollen hard above wet leather. You are also injured. She wanted to argue, wanted to guard the last scraps of dignity by refusing help, until her body forced the truth anyway. A cramp bit deep through her calf, and she exhaled sharply through her nose. Fine, she muttered. Do not look pleased. The corner of his mouth shifted, almost a smile, gone too quickly to trust. I am not pleased. I am relieved you are not trying to prove invincibility to a broken wall. For 40 breaths, she worked at her boot ties with numbed fingers. The knots had frozen stiff. Twice the lace slipped from her hand. The third time, Bastion moved to one knee across the fire and held out his palm, waiting. Rowena stared at it. Scarred, broad, empty. May I? He asked. No demand, no assumption. The question landed harder than command would have. She passed him the lace. He warmed the leather ties near the flames, careful not to scorch them, then threaded fur strips along the inside seam and rewrapped each boot with the efficiency of someone who had done this in campaign snow 100 times. His hands were rough, but every pull was measured to support, not pinch. He checked circulation with 2 fingers at her ankle and looked up for permission each time. She gave small nods, jaw tight. "You learned field care," she said quietly. He tied off the second boot. "I learned what happens when leaders call endurance a virtue and then bury their own." When she did not answer, he rose and returned to the satchel. The broth pot this time was larger, mixed with grain and a little dried root. He set it to warm, then handed her the cup first without fanfare. "You first again?" she asked. "You are building blood for 2, he said. "I can miss a meal and remain functional. You cannot." She drank in cautious sips, heat spreading through her chest, easing the iron band around her ribs. He waited until she finished, then took what was left in the pot and ate standing, facing the doorway, as if even hunger had to negotiate with vigilance. "I keep expecting the turn. The price. The sentence hidden inside kindness. Men who speak softly in tribunals still sign the order that ruins you. Men who vow duty still choose status when tested." So why does this feel different? He is dangerous, yes, in every way that matters. But danger with rules is not the same as cruelty without limit. I am tired of reading threats in every shadow and being right. I am more tired of being wrong about the ones who offer help. If trust is a door, mine is splintered and jammed, not locked. I can open it an inch, not more, not yet. But an inch is still movement. The storm held them there. At intervals, Bastian left a small whistle code at the arch and received 2-note answers from the dark. He shared each update without prompting. North line intact. No pursuit scent in the lower pines. Wind turning east. Near what must have been the last quarter of the night, she drifted into shallow sleep and woke with a strangled gasp, palms pressed to her belly, muscles rigid from a wave of fear that mimicked labor and then receded. Firelight had burned low to embers. Bastian was already awake, back against stone, eyes on her, body still. "Pain pattern?" he asked. "False, I think." Her voice shook despite effort. "It comes when I dream the pyres." He shifted closer by inches and stopped. "Do you want contact?" She had not realized tears had gathered until one slid cold to her jaw. She hated that he could see it. She hated more that she wanted the steadiness he offered. Rowena gave one short nod. He moved his hand to the blanket near the curve of her belly, not on her skin, just enough that warmth traveled through fur and wool. The bond in her chest answered with a low, grounding thrum. His head bowed slightly, as if making oath over an altar. "No one decides your worth again," he said, voice low enough to blend with the embers. "Not council, not cult, not crown. If you choose to fight, I fight beside you. If you choose to walk away from all of it, I clear the road. I will not make your life another court taking votes over your body." The tight knot behind her ribs loosened by a fraction she had forgotten was possible. When gray finally thinned the storm dark at the arch, he stood in one fluid motion and doused the coals to black. "Time," he said. "We have a narrow window." By the time they left the keep, dawn had not fully broken, only bled pale behind shredded cloud. Snow reached mid-calf in drifts and hard crust on the ridge. Bastian took the lead down the switchback and set a pace that matched her shortened stride, never looking back in impatience, only checking footing and offering warnings. "Ice lip left. Loose shale under that drift. Take my arm for this drop if you want it." She took it twice. 3 hours later, the mountain narrowed toward the river corridor, where pines gave way to alder and dark water cut through stone like a wound that never sealed. A checkpoint bridge spanned the choke point, guarded by wolves in gray and blue leathers bearing the crest of the Iron Veil allied pack. Not Ash Moon. Not safe either. Bastion slowed before the tree line and pulled his hood lower, tucking the star knot at his throat out of sight. The raw force she had felt in the keep settled under his skin, banked but present. "I had hoped to cross without names," he said. "If they honor guest right, we pass quietly. Stay on my right." They stepped into the open. 2 sentries dropped from the bridge posts. Spears crossed. Both were young, shoulders broad with that brittle confidence that came from authority borrowed, not earned. One scanned Rowena once and curled his lip. "Travel papers," he said. "Emergency passage under storm protocol," Bastion replied. His voice was roughened, neutral, meant for anonymity. "Pregnant guest requiring shelter." The second sentry leaned to sniff the air and recoiled theatrically. "Ash smoke on her. Deadlands mud. You picked up a cursed womb, stranger." Rowena felt the old humiliation flash hot through her face. She kept her spine straight anyway. "Watch your mouth," Bastion said. The first sentry barked a laugh. "Or what? You drag doctrine into our gate? We do not host contagion. She turns around or you both camp with the ravens." "Name your captain," Bastion said. "Now. Do not order me on my own bridge." More guards appeared at the railing, curious, then wary as tension sharpened. The second sentry stepped toward Rowena and pointed his spear butt at her belly in a contemptuous gesture. "Move, Ash girl, you bring bad moon into our den." Bastion moved between them so fast the spear tip never reached her. One hand caught the shaft and snapped it against his knee with a crack that echoed off the river walls. He let the broken wood fall at the sentry's boots. Then he lifted his head and released what he had been holding back. Power struck the bridge like pressure before thunder. The scent of pine and snow drowned under pure alpha command, ancient and unarguable. Every guard froze. One dropped to a knee on instinct, then another, then all of them in a staggered line, breath rough, eyes wide. Bastion's pupils narrowed to predator slits. Amber burned through his irises with cold authority. "I am Bastion Starfall," he said, and his voice carried from railing to riverbank without effort. "By old covenant and moon law, this woman stands under my guest right and my blood protection. Any insult offered to Rowena Wildfire is an insult offered to me. Any hand raised against her is raised against the crown." Silence followed, heavy as stone. Even the river seemed to hush beneath the command. A captain rushed from the gate tower, older, scarred across one cheek, and took in the kneeling line with one stunned glance. He dropped to both knees at once, fist to heart. "My king, we did not know." "That is the only reason your men are still standing," Bastion said. He did not raise his volume. He did not need to. "You will correct this breach in your rights. Guest right is not selective. Purity slurs are not law. Do you understand?" "Yes, my king." The captain turned, seized the nearest sentry by the back of the neck, and forced his head down. "Apologize." The young wolf's voice shook. "I spoke out of rank, High Lady. I ask pardon." Rowena looked at him, at the fear and shame warring in his face, and heard every echo of the pyre crowd pressing against her ribs. She could ask for punishment. She wanted to, for one hard breath. Then she remembered what power used without restraint had made of her own pack. "Learn faster than your elders did," she said. "That is your pardon." Bastion's gaze flicked to her, sharp with surprise and something like respect. The captain barked orders. The gate chains lifted. Guards scrambled to clear the path, keeping their eyes lowered as Rowena and Bastion crossed the bridge. She felt the weight of stairs on her back, but no one blocked her. No one spat. No one reached. Halfway across, Bastion matched her pace and held out his hand, palm up, not touching. "At your side," he said quietly. "If you still want it." She looked at his hand, then at the river below, black and relentless under broken ice. For months she had walked one step behind fear, behind accusation, behind men certain they owned the story of her life. Standing beside him did not erase any of that. It did something else. It made room. Rowena placed her hand in his. "Do not make me regret this," she said. His fingers closed, steady and warm. "I do not intend to." They passed through the Ironvale gate shoulder to shoulder, and for the first time since the pyres, Rowena felt her guard lower not from exhaustion, but from choice. The first crux revealed itself before the gate even closed behind them. Stepping into safety had made Rowena visible again, and visibility was the currency Cyrus knew how to weaponize. Ironvale's inner yard was a crescent of dark timber halls and torch posts, shielded by slate windbreaks, practical rather than grand, built to survive spring floods and winter raids. Wolves crossed the yard with hurried purpose, carrying grain sacks, mending tack, checking spearheads. Conversations thinned as they recognized Bastion. Knees bent, heads lowered. Respect moved through the compound in a widening ring, and with it came startled glances toward Rowena's belly, her ash-streaked cloak, her hand still in the king's. The captain from the bridge rose from his bow and kept his eyes down. "My king, command hall is secured. We detained a rider at the north post trying to cross under falsified salt papers. He carried ash moon seals." Bastion's grip on Rowena's hand tightened once, then eased. "Alive?" "Yes." "Then we hear him now." Rowena wanted a bed, warmth, 10 silent minutes without strangers studying her breath. Instead, she followed Bastion across the yard into the command hall, because exhaustion did not cancel danger, and she had learned that delay was often another name for surrender. The hall smelled of resin smoke, damp wool, and iron oil. A map table dominated the center, weighed down with river stones and knife sheaths marking patrol lines. At the far wall, a young wolf knelt with wrists bound in moon iron cord, chin bloodied from a split lip. Ash moon crescent burned into the leather at his shoulder. He looked up when Rowena entered, then froze at the sight of Bastion. Fear raced over his face so quickly it was almost pity-inducing. Almost. Bastion did not sit. "Name." "Kellen." "Your true one." "Kellen Voss." A swallow. "Courier rank." "Message origin." Kellen's gaze flicked toward Rowena, calculating. Bastion noticed and stepped just enough to block that line of sight. "Look at me when you decide how honest you plan to be." The courier flinched at the tone. From High Purifier, Cyrus Stormborn to elder houses in Thornwood, Darkwater, and Winterfell. The old family names dropped into the room like stones in deep water. Ironvale officers exchanged sharp looks. Bastion's voice stayed flat. "Read it." Kellen shook his head hard. "It is ciphered." Bastion nodded to the captain, who placed a satchel on the table and tipped out 3 waxed scroll tubes. Ash-gray seals, each stamped with a crescent over a broken star. Treason cast as liturgy. Rowena felt her pulse climb. "Break one." The captain hesitated, eyes moving to Bastion. Bastion gave a single nod. Wax cracked. Parchment unfurled. Not cipher, then. Not subtle either. The captain read aloud, voice rough with disbelief. "By Eclipse authority and purity doctrine, all lawful pacts are summoned to holy tribunal at the ancient stone circle. The accused womb-bearer Rowena Wildfire is to be surrendered for severing right under Ashbrand's scepter. Her unlawful claim bond shall be cut before witness, and Moon's signature extracted as proof that prophecy blood can be broken." The room went still enough for Rowena to hear her own breathing. The captain continued, jaw hardening. "Attendance mandatory for all elders wishing to retain voting rights in spring accords. Refusal constitutes hidden contagion and forfeiture of grazing treaty." There it was. Not just fanaticism. Leverage. Food routes. land rights, winter survival terms twisted into obedience. Bastian took the parchment and read the lower seal line himself. He is using council law he does not own. He bought enough elders to fake ownership, Rowena said. Her voice emerged steady, though her hands had gone cold. He did it at my judgment. He will do it again on a larger stage. Kellen spoke up fast, words tumbling. He says you will come because you cannot afford to look afraid. He says if the king refuses public right, the neutral pacts will call his crown cursed and withdraw levy support. He says this ends in one night either way. Bastian's gaze snapped to him. What does he want besides spectacle? Kellen swallowed. Rule by exception. He keeps saying free pacts only survive if blood unions die young. Revulsion moved through Rowena like nausea. Free pacts. Cyrus had always loved language that sounded righteous from a distance and predatory up close. Bastian bent over the map table, knuckles braced on wood. For a moment, command dropped, and she saw the man under it, a strategist forced to count lives as variables, while the one life that mattered most stood 3 paces away, trying not to shake. His voice when it came was controlled iron. He has the Ashbrand scepter. Confirm. Kellen nodded. Taken from an old reliquary under false writ 6 months ago. Only he and 2 ritualists touch it. That answered the question Rowena had not wanted to voice. Cyrus was dangerous because he was not merely cruel. He was patient, organized, and fluent in every loophole built by ancestors who thought sacred law could never be used as a weapon. Bastian straightened and addressed the hall. Lockdown east and north approaches. Double sentries at the river crossing. No tribunal summons enters or leaves this compound without my mark. Send runners to neutral packs with full transcript and seal impressions. Not rumors. Evidence. The captain struck fist to chest and moved. Rowena watched the parchment curl in Bastian's hand and understood, with a kind of hollow clarity, that she had crossed from exile into politics without passing through peace. By late afternoon, Ironvale's yard had turned from refuge to warboard. Messengers came and went in bursts of snowlight, boots pounding frozen planks, carrying tablets, counterseals, refusals dressed as caution. One neutral elder replied before sunset, "We cannot adjudicate until eclipse assembly." Another sent no words, only a blank token of white bone, the old signal for withheld allegiance. Bastian pinned each response to the map edge in quiet sequence, building a pattern no one in the room wanted to name. Rowena sat near the hearth bench in the side chamber they had given her, boots off, feet raised on folded blankets as ordered. A healer had pressed bitter willow tincture into her hands and fussed over swelling until Rowena threatened to pour it on the floor out of spite. That had earned a startled laugh from the healer and, from Bastian across the room, a fleeting look that might have been relief. He joined her when the chamber cleared, carrying a bowl of lentils and charred flatbread. Eat. You always issue food like a military decree? It works. A breath of silence. Fire snapped low. She accepted the bowl and took a few slow bites. Do you plan to surrender me to keep your alliances? No. He answered too quickly for diplomacy. Truth, then, or stubbornness. Then they will say you started a civil fracture over one woman. They can say what they like. She set the bowl down. You do not get to pretend words do not matter. Cyrus wins with words first, blades second. Bastian crouched in front of her, forearms resting on his knees, meeting her at eye level. I am not pretending. I am prioritizing. There is a difference. Heat pulsed beneath her skin where the bond sat, a low current that responded whenever he came close. She hated how much her body listened to him. She hated more that part of her felt calmer when it did. I want to trust this, and I do not want to need it. Both are true at once. I am tired enough to mistake steadiness for salvation, and I know better than anyone what happens when a woman mistakes rescue for respect. But he asked before touching. He moved when I said move. He stood between me and contempt without turning me into an object lesson. I am still afraid, still angry, still one bad memory away from bolting. Yet when he says no one decides my worth, the words do not clang like performance. They land like shelter. If this is what danger feels like when it is bound to honor, I can face it. Not because I am unbreakable, because I am done living as if broken means owned. A horn call sounded from the west tower. One long, two short. Arrival signal. Bastion rose immediately. Stay here. I am done staying in side rooms while men decide my fate. His jaw tightened. Then he gave a sharp nod. At my shoulder, then. They returned to the command hall as two dust-caked emissaries were being admitted, both wearing neutral gray cloaks clasped with elder knots. Not Iron Veil, council riders. The older one bowed with precise formal distance and offered a sealed tablet. From Provisional Elder Circle, she said, to Alpha King Bastion Starfall and named Party Rowena Wildfire. Bastion broke the seal and read. The muscle in his cheek jumped once. Rowena held out her hand. He passed it to her. The decree was brief, legal, and venomous. Attendance at Eclipse Tribunal was mandatory for any party asserting legitimacy under Old Moon Law. Refusal would be entered as tacit confession of corrupt bond practice. Temporary sanctions on Starfall trade access would begin at moonset tomorrow. They are choking your roots, she said quietly. They are trying. The older emissary kept her gaze on the far wall. There is an addendum delivered separately under private right. Speak it, Bastion said. The younger emissary, barely more than a girl, flinched and blurted. Cyrus says if Rowena appears without resistance, the child will be examined only and returned alive. The chamber erupted in snarls and curses. Bastion's command slammed out in a single word, and silence fell flat. Rowena folded the decree with deliberate care, though rage had made her fingers numb. Tell your circle this. I received their summons. I reject their language. I will answer under proper law, not coercion. The older emissary bowed again, this time deeper. Respect, or fear, or both. Message carried. Night settled hard. Snow stopped. Cold sharpened. An hour after moonrise, Iron Veil's east alarm bell began to hammer. Everything accelerated. Wolves ran for armor racks. Torches flared along the palisade. From the watch slit, Rowena saw shadows pouring through the tree line near the old mill track, too coordinated to be raiders, moving in wedge formations with ash-gray shields that caught moonlight like bone. Ash Moon Vanguard, the captain shouted from the stair. They are carrying chain rigs. Not siege chains, capture chains. Bastion buckled his bracers while issuing orders in clipped bursts. Archers to upper rail. Keep them off the inner gate. No fire arrows near granaries. Captain, seal the west postern. Rowena comes with me to the stone undercroft. I am not hiding underground while they drag your people into a slaughter. You are not a bargaining token. And you are not my jailer. For one charged beat, they stared at each other while the alarm kept striking. Then the north wall gave a thunderous crack. Not breach, but impact heavy enough to shake mortar dust from beams. The captain skidded into view, breath white. My king, they brought a relic ram. Moon Iron Head. They are not trying to burn through. They are trying to break the gate clean and rush the courtyard. Bastion swore under his breath and grabbed Rowena's hand, already moving. Undercroft now. We reposition from below and flank. The lights died. Not extinguished by wind. Smothered all at once by a spreading gray shimmer that rolled over the hall like ash-laced fog, swallowing torch flame to dull embers. A ritual veil. Engineered silence followed, thick and wrong. Even the alarm bell cut off mid-strike. In that hush, a new voice carried from beyond the gate, amplified by writework and stone. Rowena Wildfire, Cyrus called, smooth as polished bone. You can force me to take a fortress, or you can save these wolves and come to judgment willingly. Choose quickly. I brought witnesses. Bastion pulled Rowena behind him as the inner doors shuttered under the first ram hit. Then came a second. Oak split. Iron screamed. Through the widening seam she saw gray cloaks, chain teams, and at their center Cyrus Stormborn, holding a staff crowned in black metal that drank moonlight instead of reflecting it. The Ashbrand Scepter. The third strike blew the doors inward. Ash moon zealots flooded the threshold, moon iron loops whistling through the dark, and the first chain snapped around Bastion's sword arm as Cyrus smiled and said, "Now the rite begins. Now the rite begins." The chain cinched tighter around Bastion's sword arm as two Ash Moon ritualists yanked backward in practiced unison, moon iron links hissing where they touched his skin. He planted his feet and drove forward anyway, dragging both men half astride before a third loop snapped around his chest and locked under his shoulder. The impact rattled the hall. Ironvale wolves crashed into zealots at the threshold, the fight collapsing into close quarters where claws, elbows, and shields mattered more than rank. Cyrus did not join the melee. He stood just beyond the broken doors, cloak unmoving in the ash-gray veil, the Ashbrand scepter angled across his body like a priestly staff. Black metal crowned with dull crystal. Wrong in the moonlight. Every time he struck the butt of it against stone, the air thickened and pack voices staggered. Commands came out slurred, then vanished. Rowena reached for the nearest fallen spear. A zealot caught her wrist with a hooked chain and jerked hard enough to wrench her shoulder. She twisted with the pull, kicked his knee, and tore free, but another loop whistled past her ear and bit into the floor where she had stood. The captain from the bridge slammed into that attacker from the side, driving him into a pillar. "Hi, lady! Behind me!" the captain shouted. "Do not call me that. Keep your line." Bastion ripped one chain free with brute force and roared, a sound that shook dust from the rafters, but Cyrus raised the scepter and the roar cut jaggedly short, as if the ritual veil swallowed half his breath. Amber bled into Bastion's irises, predator and king surfacing together. Yet even that authority faltered under the relic's dampening pulse. Cyrus smiled without warmth. "You feel it, Starfall. Old law can crown you. Older law can break you." He lifted his voice, right amplified again. "Cease this, all of you. Any wolf still fighting when I count to 3 will be entered as defiler and sentenced with him." The zealots froze first, disciplined by doctrine. Ironvale wolves hesitated next, fury battling fear of legal traps. Rowena saw the exact instant Cyrus's strategy landed, not victory by strength, but by forcing everyone into a frame where he named resistance sacrilege. 1. The scepter struck stone. 2. A chain team flanked Bastion, links ready at his legs. 3. Bastion lunged anyway. Cyrus flicked the scepter, and black light snapped out in a narrow arc. It hit the floor in front of Bastion and exploded into a lattice of rune lines that climbed his boots and locked his stance. Not pain, exactly. Constraint turned into geometry. Rowena's heartbeat slammed in her ears. "Cyrus, enough." He turned toward her, satisfied that she had spoken first. "Not enough, not yet. You will walk to the ancient circle under witness. You will submit to severing. If you do it without spectacle, Ironvale keeps its grain stores, and Starfall keeps half its trade roads. If not, every pack that fed your king this winter pays for your pride." The captain spat at Cyrus's feet. 2 zealots seized him and forced him to his knees. Rowena met Cyrus's stare and saw calculation layered over zeal, the same man who had sold salt with 3 lies, and called it stewardship. "You forged testimony at the pyres. I curated truth. You mean you purchased it?" His mouth thinned. "I mean I built a world where blood fear can be governed." The scepter thudded down again. Chains lifted. She and Bastion were surrounded and marched out through the shattered gate, not as fugitives, but as centerpieces. Snow had stopped, leaving the night brittle and clear, the moon already edging toward eclipse shadow. Ironvale wolves lined the yard under forced stillness, while Ash Moon teams formed a moving ring around their captives. They were driven across the yard and up the bluff path in one unbroken procession, boots grinding frost and gravel, while chain teams rotated at each turn to keep Bastion anchored and Rowena bracketed. By the time the climb leveled, the ancient stone circle above the river bluffs opened before them, torches already lit in deliberate symmetry. Cyrus had prepared this in advance. Neutral pack elders stood at the perimeter in gray cloaks, flanked by sentries from Thornwood, Darkwater, and Winterfell. The same emissary pair from earlier waited near the witness post, faces drawn. The scroll tubes from Ironvale's command table sat on a carved basin at center stone beside ritual chains and a shallow brazier of moon salt coals. External contacts answered, Rowena thought grimly. Every warning Bastion sent had brought wolves here. Some to help, some to watch her fall. Cyrus stepped into the circle and spread his arms. By Eclipse authority, we commence severing of unlawful claim bond between Bastion Starfall and Rowena Wildfire. Witnesses, mark the center. Bastion strained against Mooniron, jaw tight. Do not give him your voice. Rowena looked at him once, then at the ring of elders who would later pretend they had no options if she remained silent. The crux sharpened with painful clarity. If she ran, Cyrus would call it confession. If she stayed passive, he would turn her body into precedent. Either way, he wrote law over her. She stepped forward until chains scraped behind her boots. I invoke trial by Heartfire, she said, clear enough to carry to the outer stones, under pre-Crown Moon Code, section of contested bond and coerced witness. The nearest elder jolted as if struck. Murmurs broke the perimeter. Cyrus's smile vanished. That code is obsolete. The older emissary from the council straightened. Not obsolete, dormant. It cannot be refused once spoken before lunar witness. Rowena did not look at Cyrus as she kept speaking. I name coercion, forged testimony, and ritual abuse in purity proceedings. I request truth flame adjudication with neutral packs observing. Bastion's voice came low, urgent. Rowena, this path hurts. She turned her head just enough for him to hear. Do not shield me. Stand if I ask, not sooner. Then she walked into the center and took the ashbrand chains in both hands. Pain lanced up her arms, a white-hot bite that made her knees threaten to buckle. She locked her elbows, breathed once, and pulled the links across her palms until the runes aligned with the bond mark at her shoulder. Heat pulsed beneath her skin, not borrowed from relic or king, but rising from the lineage she had spent years treating as a family story and nothing more. I am here. I am not ash for them to scatter. I am not a vessel they vote over. I remember the pyres, the rope in Mara's hand, Jorn staring at his boots while lies were spoken in my name. I remember the keep fire and the first steady breath after months of fear. I am terrified and I am still standing. Pain is loud, but truth is louder when I choose it. This body is mine. This child is mine to protect, not to display. Let them watch. Let them see each theft, each forged line, each coin traded for silence. I do not need permission from men who profit from my erasure. I call what happened by its name, and I do not lower my voice. Silver fire leapt from chain to chain, racing along etched grooves in the stones. The brazier flared. Above them, eclipse shadow touched the moon's lower edge. The circle answered with living memory. Images rippled across the judgment stone like water lit from beneath. Joren in Cyrus's side chamber, taking a heavy purse with shaking fingers. Elsie weeping while a zealot held her oath hand over hot iron until she repeated scripted testimony. Elder seals pressed onto blank decrees later filled with purity clauses never voted in open council. Gasps tore through the witnesses. One Thornwood matriarch dropped her torch. Cyrus raised the Ashbrand scepter and shouted over the uproar. Fabrication, bond hallucination. She is projecting mating fever. Rowena pointed with a shaking hand to the basin by the center stone. Open the tubes. No one moved. Open them, she repeated, voice cutting harder. Seal impressions, route bribes, summons drafts, physical proof. If I lie, burn me for it. The Darkwater elder stepped in, broke the first tube, and unfolded the parchment under torchlight. His expression curdled as he read. He broke the second and third without being asked. Around the ring, neutral wolves leaned in, seeing not rumor now but ink, seals, signatures. Cyrus's control cracked. He drove forward, scepter lifted high, aiming straight for Rowena's chest. Then I end the right and your mouth with it. Rowena slammed both chain ends into the center groove. Silver fire surged up in a ring around her and caught the descending scepter a handspan from impact, locking metal against light. The shockwave knocked nearby zealots backward. Cyrus cursed and tried to wrench free. Bastion moved. He tore the last moon iron loop from his legs, crossed the circle in 3 strides, and struck Cyrus across the forearm with the broken chain weight. The scepter flew from Cyrus's grip, skidding across stone into the silver ring where it shuddered and went still. Bastion pivoted, drove Cyrus down, and forced him to his knees with one arm pinned behind his back. The entire circle held its breath. Cyrus spat dust and fury. Prophecy is a leash, and you are both fools for wearing it. Rowena stepped through the fading fire and picked up the trapped scepter with both hands. It fought her grip, cold and hungry. She met Cyrus's eyes. Love is not a leash, she said. Your fear was. She brought the Ashbrand scepter down against the judgment stone. Black metal split with a crack like winter ice breaking on a river. Light burst outward, then collapsed inward, ripping through the crescent marks on Ash Moon zealots' wrists and throats. One by one the marks went dark. The ash-gray veil over the circle dissolved, and sound returned all at once. Wind in the pines, wolves shouting, someone sobbing with relief. Bastion hauled Cyrus upright and held him facing the witness ring. Speak sentence. For a long moment no elder answered. Then the older council emissary stepped forward, voice amplified by formal right. By heartfire adjudication and neutral witness, Cyrus Stormborn is found guilty of coercive ritual practice, forged tribunal process, theft of sacred reliquary, and incitement against protected bond law. Rank stripped, voice rights revoked, property seized to restitution trust. Sentence is void exile beyond all recognized pack borders for life, under moon iron binding. 2 Winterfell wardens advanced with heavy shackles. Cyrus laughed once, ragged now, doctrine finally unable to hide the man beneath it. You think exile ends an idea? Rowena answered before anyone else could. No. But truth ends your right to weaponize it here. The shackles closed. Cyrus was pulled from the center stone while neutral scribes recorded sentence on fresh tablets in full view. No hidden chambers, no forged additions. The 3 open scrolls were sealed again under new marks and handed to the witness archive keeper for public copying by dawn. As the eclipse shadow began to pass, Bastion turned toward Rowena, chest heaving, face streaked with ash and moonlight. He did not reach for her until she nodded. When his hand finally closed around hers, the circle saw it, and no one dared call it unlawful again. The wind off the bluff cut through ash and sweat as wardens dragged Cyrus toward the lower path in moon iron restraints. He kept talking until the older emissary spoke a final sealing phrase, and the iron at his throat tightened, taking his voice exactly as sentence required. Around the stones, neutral scribes moved quickly, pressing fresh wax and copying names while the evidence was still warm from human hands. The 3 scroll tubes were logged to the witness archive keeper, each seal impression sketched in duplicate, and Kellen Voss was placed under oath transfer instead of execution. courier rank stripped, and testimony retained for restitution hearings. Rowena watched until Cyrus vanished below the pines. Only then did her knees start to shake. Bastian angled his body between her and the crowd, not hiding her, just giving her a pocket of quiet. "The circle is done," he said softly. "We can go." She looked back once at the judgment stone, split black marks where the scepter had shattered. "The relic shards?" "Collected." He nodded toward a Winterfell warden holding a locked iron coffer. "They go into the deep river vault before sunrise, with witnesses from 3 packs." "Good." Her voice rasped. No relic left for another zealot to crown himself with. They descended under escort as Eclipse shadow thinned from the moon. At the lower switchback, the Ironvale captain caught up, breathing hard, helm under one arm. "My king, high lady, report. Outer yards secured. 12 Ash Moon taken alive. 4 fled toward the ravine and were tracked. No civilians lost." He hesitated, then faced Rowena directly. "The sentry who insulted you has been reassigned to guest right training under the temple warden. By your order, he keeps his life and earns the lesson." Rowena gave one tired nod, then let him learn it all. By the time they reached the old signal keep, dawn had not broken, only silvered the eastern ridges. The ruined chamber was exactly as they had left it: cracked wall, smoke-dark stone, and the ring of blackened coals where survival had become claim. Bastian rebuilt the fire in silence, hands steady now that battle had somewhere to go besides his pulse. When flames climbed, he stood and turned to her. "This time," he said, voice rough with restraint, "nothing happens by accident. Nothing by old law alone. Only what you choose." The words landed deeper than any vow shouted before witnesses. Rowena stepped closer until the heat touched both of them. She could smell cedar, iron, and the clean winter note that always clung to him. "I choose," she said, "but I need to hear yours plainly." He swallowed once. "I choose you above throne leverage, above elder convenience, above fear dressed as duty. I choose your safety, your voice, and this child as my blood and my future, if you allow it." His gaze held hers without flinching. "May I mark you as my mate?" Tears burned her eyes before she could stop them, not from sorrow this time, but from the release of being asked instead of taken. She lifted her hand and touched the scar crossing his throat, the one that had first warned her he survived old violence and carried it honestly. "Yes," she whispered, "and you will be marked by me in return." He exhaled like a man walking out of winter. Bastian knelt first and bared his throat, turning his head so the pulse beat clear beneath skin and scar. The gesture was not theatrical. It was trust offered where it could be broken. Rowena's breath shook. She braced one palm on his shoulder, bent, and pressed her mouth to the place where life ran closest to the surface. The bite hurt him. She felt the flinch, the involuntary tightening under her hand. Then his hands came to her waist, gentle, anchoring. Warmth surged through the bond, fierce and bright, carrying images not in words. Him on campaign ridges refusing court summons. Him standing alone in a hall of carved thrones. Him hearing her name for the first time at Ironvale's gate and choosing not strategy but her. His pulse pounded against her tongue and settled into hers. "Mine," he said, hoarse, not as ownership but as recognition. She drew back, forehead to his. "Yours," she answered, and felt the bond answer like a struck bell. He rose, one hand at her jaw, giving her every chance to step away. She did not. She turned her head, exposing the curve where neck met shoulder, and nodded. Bastian's mouth found the place with reverence that undid her more than urgency could have. The bite came sharp, a clean line of pain that flashed white behind her eyes, her fingers clenched in his tunic, Breath left her in a broken sound. For one suspended heartbeat, she stood in raw sensation, all old fear trying to rise with it. Then the pain transformed. Heat poured through her chest and down her spine in steady waves, not consuming, not taking, but aligning. The tight vigilance she had carried for months eased by degrees, as if a door she had wedged shut in storm finally opened to let light through. Through the bond came him again, stripped of title, his terror when Cyrus named severing, his restraint at the keep fire, his quiet hunger for a home that did not require armor. Mate, he whispered against her skin. The mark at her shoulder flared hot, then calmed into a deep, living thrum that matched the beat beneath his own skin. When he lifted his head, gold light traced both marks for a breath and settled. She swayed. He caught her instantly, wrapping her in his cloak and his arms, holding her as if the world could wait. For a long time they stayed that way beside the fire where exile had first ended. No crowd, no tribunal, just breath, heat, and the bond resting steady between them, unquestionable now. 3 days later, under full witness in Iron Vale's great hall, the new covenant was spoken aloud and carved, while scribes copied every clause in public view. Bastian sat the high seat, but did not rule alone. Rowena stood beside him with her hand over the fresh mark at her shoulder and read the reforms in her own voice. Bloodline tribunals abolished, coercive ritual law outlawed, claim fire interpretations void without mutual consent, guest right enforceable across all allied borders. The older emissary signed first. The Darkwater elder who had opened the tubes signed next. Even reluctant houses signed when the archived scrolls were unsealed, and Jorn and Elsie testified in person. Voices shaking but clear, naming Cyrus's bribes and threats. Pell admitted assault at the pyres, and was stripped of enforcer rank to labor restitution. Before adjournment, Rowena required the hunt to be settled on record. The ash-sealed pursuit warrants issued after her exile were read aloud, then voided under covenant seal before the older emissary, the Iron Vale captain, and neutral scribes. The former Ash Moon Hunter detail that carried those warrants was disbanded in open hall. Its acting lead and 2 chain captains were taken into custody for unlawful cross-border pursuit, and the remaining trackers swore stand down under witness. Mara was summoned and came in ash-gray wool, eyes fixed on the floor. When asked why she had handed over the rope, she said only, "I was afraid to be next," and offered no fuller truth. Rowena listened, accepted the confession for the record, and barred her from command. Tamsin crossed the hall after, and asked forgiveness in a whisper. Rowena did not embrace her, but she did not turn away. Old Brindle voted to dissolve the Purity Council and spent his remaining authority transferring grain rights to families exiled under false doctrine. At sunset that same day, Rowena walked the lower courtyard with the bridge captain and the temple warden to open the first sanctuary house for abandoned mothers and oathless wolves. She placed the charter key in the warden's hand herself. By midsummer, the valley below Starfall Fortress rang with drums instead of alarm bells. Wildflowers climbed the outer stones. Allied packs gathered in formal colors for crown and claiming under a clear moon, and no one needed to be dragged to witness it. Rowena wore dark blue wool edged in silver thread, her son asleep against her chest in a sling clasped with the new covenant seal. When she stepped onto the central dais, wolves who had once looked through her now bowed. Bastian took the oath first, voice carrying over the court. "I claim no silence from my mate. I claim partnership, counsel, and shared rule." Rowena answered with her palm over his heart. "I claim no permission to exist. I claim home, law, and chosen family." Before all of them, they touched marks, then foreheads, and spoke together. "Mate." The child stirred, blinking up at moonlight and torch glow, and the court laughed softly with the simple relief of peace holding. Music rose, The sanctuary stewards from Iron Vale arrived with ledgers already full of names, now crossed from displaced to housed. Kellen, under supervised service, delivered the final archive copies to the public vault. Cyrus's exile writ was posted at every border stone, and no pack challenged it. Later, when the court thinned and the night cooled, Rowena stood with Bastion on the same terrace where sentries once watched for war. His arms settled around her. Her head rested briefly against his shoulder. Below them, fires burned in orderly rings, not pyres, just homes. No one asked her to run. No one voted on her worth. She had a mark she chose, a crown she helped redefine, and a future that no longer depended on surviving one more night.